Hello, everybody. Welcome to Webinar Wednesday. My name is Martin Lovers. I'm the Chief Trend Watcher of Supply Chain Media. You may also know me as the Editor-in-Chief of Supply Chain Movement. That's a quarterly magazine, but also bi-weekly newsletter, and also a huge group on LinkedIn. I think 50,000 members already. And I'm also the architect of the IT subway map. You have seen it. We'll discuss it later. So in the next hour, we have a live webinar talking about digital supply chain twin, and we talk about shadow planning and a concept. And it is great to mention that and go into that. But the best part is we have Zebra as a customer. So we will talk with a vendor, but we'll also talk to a customer of a company, a manufacturing company using actual tools for digital supply chain twin application. All right. So on the left, you see myself. So you know me. And in the middle, we have Ty. Ty, welcome.
Hey, thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Yep, loud and clear. So
Right,
Ty,
perfect.
you're responsible for supply chain planning and transportation at Zebra Technologies. So welcome. So you are the supply chain expert and in this call. So good to have you for one. And Jeff Eckel, you're Director of Product Marketing for Supply and Manufacturing and AI and e2open. Welcome.
Yes, thank you. Looking forward to this.
So we have a lot to discuss, and we go in deep on digital supply chain twins and shadow planning. But before we start, some household rules. So this webinar will be recorded, will be made available on YouTube within 48 hours, and you will also be able to download the PDF of the slides. So the audience on mute. So, but you can interact with us. So on the right-hand side, you see the chat functionality, so you can use it. Probably you'll ask, is this being recorded? Yes, it is. But the main thing is, if you have questions to Jeff or Ty, please use the Q&A functionality down below, so we can track down the questions. So I think that the best way is to use the Q&A functionality. You can vote on a question by others, etc. So that's one thing. So if the questions are in line of the conversation I will be having with Ty and Jeff, I will ask these questions immediately to have the conversation more interactive. But we also have an extra 30 minutes afterwards. But we have a Q&A at the end. But afterwards, we go to the lounge. So after the whole hour, we have an extra 30 minutes to have a conversation with the three of us. So if you have more questions, please join us over there. And we will be there to ask further questions. So as of now, I will put off my camera, and Ty and Jeff will do the same. So basically, you can focus on the slides. You can even enlarge the slides to have a view on that. All right. So there's a lot of things happening in the world. A lot of ripple effects since the start of COVID in 2020, already 4 years ago. All things were happening: lockdowns, shortages, bullwhips. Inflation was kicking in, and also some countries were getting into a recession. Some were getting out of it. And Germany is getting into it. 2 years ago, the war in Ukraine started with also all kind of ripple effects, also raising a lot of costs, etc. Next, last year, Gaza was happening, also impact on the Red Sea. And in Europe, we have ESG regulations as of next year, CSRD. That could be kind of a black swan for a lot of companies. So basically, as of next year, up to 55,000 companies will be impacted. Not only the publicly traded companies, but also their tier 1 and tier 2. So basically, they have to deliver the scope 3 data, etc. So there's a lot of things happening. And we'll talk about digital supply chain twins. So Jeff, if you look at this kind of landscape and how this is evolving, so what is your take on this market and what is needed for companies in this space?
Well, I think this highlights the fact that global supply chain disruptions are going to continue to happen and continue to happen at scale. And each of those that you see there have different time horizons. So when these happen, our brands are really forced to really understand what's going on. Is there an immediate shortage? Is there a long-term shortage? Are regions impacted? And really understanding all of those impacts comes down to what is, for most brands, a very manual process. So it's not that when these things happen, we don't react or we can't react properly. We have to react. So what I'm seeing is that there's just going to be a constant evolution of these disruptions. And what it means is we've got to get better with the data that we're using to analyze the impacts of them. And I think that's where we're going with shadow planning here.
Yeah. And in the middle, you see the bullwhips, and everybody in supply chain knows how do you prevent the bullwhip. That is, share data instantly with all your partners upstream and downstream to be in sync of what's happening outside. But you don't do it with all your partners. You do it only with your strategic partners, etc. And we will talk about it with Zebra later on, how they do that with their tier 1 and tier 2 partners. So that's good to see. Briefly about e2open, some of you might not know e2open or the bandwidth of e2open. As I mentioned before, I'm the architect of this visualization, what I call the SCM IT Supermap Europe. Basically, it's a representation and visualization of all the proven supply chain software vendors in Europe. You have different kind of supply lines: ERP, WMS, TMS, SNOP, visibility. Even on ESG, there are more and more vendors popping up, and they get established. So this is based on actual implementations of this kind of software. So it's not what they're selling or try to sell, but what they have implemented in Europe. And you see e2open. And if you zoom in, you see, they have acquired some applications in the past, Amber Road on global trade management. So basically, you'll see that e2open has a broad portfolio in the last years, and it's in the cloud. So that's also what you see. Well, it's almost hidden by the orange circle, but basically, this is how you see what e2open stands for. You can, Jeff, maybe you comment on this, and then we get to your overview.
Yeah, I think this is evidence of what we're seeing of a convergence of data. All of this data is coming together, and as what we're talking about is to use it in our advantage, whether it's logistics data, whether it's long-term, whether it's planning, sensing of supply, sensing of demand. All of that's really coming together to improve the insights we're gaining from our situation.
Yeah, so that's represented in this IT super map. But maybe to build on that, Jeff, please explain. We all talk about end-to-end supply chain orchestration, but maybe you can explain it more in depth. What you need and what you provide as e2open.
Yeah, thank you. At e2open, our mission is to build the most comprehensive and the most capable end-to-end supply chain software ecosystem. Pretty much by combining the networks and the data and the applications to really deliver the customer value. Now, I know that's a mouthful, but really at e2open, what we recognize is that most supply chains are massively complex and outsourced to thousands of different external ecosystem partners, even worldwide. And as a result, the brands are no longer really competing against each other, but they're really competing against that extended value chain. So our connected approach is founded on the principle that supply chain should not stop at an enterprise's borders, nor should their planning and execution. It's really that e2open combines this multi-tier network platform that connects more than 400,000 suppliers, manufacturers, transporters, channel partners, with all of that, with a full range of planning and execution applications, but doing that all in one place in the cloud to manage the extended supply chain for our clients. So it's really bringing together the visibility and the collaboration across all of the tiers for more informed end-to-end decisions and process orchestration across the whole ecosystem. So as we kind of get into the topic of shadow planning today, it should become pretty obvious that data sharing and collaboration are really the keys to actually reaching this goal of automated supply shadow planning simulations.
Okay. We don't talk that much on AI because we talk about digital supply chain twin, but AI is mentioned on the left-hand side. Can you
Sure.
briefly address how you think AI could work on all this?
There's so many different facets of AI, but really where we are kind of in a great position, from my understanding, is the data sharing, the aggregation of data, creating all of the basis for that, and then being able to apply AI on top of that in a lot of different ways. There's generation of documents automatically that are fully intelligent in terms of the data that they're mining and where they're getting it from. There's intelligent orchestration where AI is able to really help that orchestration process. And so then you get into just the unending abilities with things like machine learning and unsupervised and supervised and all of this that allows us to apply it based on the business function. So really what it comes down to is, does anybody have any better AI? No. Have they had a use case where they provide massive levels of value? That's what we're working on. We've collected lots of use cases. We're evaluating those. We're putting those in play. Some of them are baby steps. Some of them are big steps. So it's a progression, and I think we're going to see a value-based deployment of AI.
Thanks. So moving over to Ty. So Ty, tell me a bit more about Zebra.
Yeah, sure. So, Zebra's main mission here is to help our customers operate on the edge. So what we mean by that is help them operate on the edge between the physical world and the digital world, allowing them to transform what's happening in real life into data that allows them to better run their business in a more efficient manner. Right?
You see it now in a hospital environment, but I think your customer base is much broader, or not?
Correct. Yeah. So we are broadly across manufacturing and logistics, warehousing, hospitals and medical, and retail. Right.
Yeah.
So just some of the use cases here. So food safety certainly is top of mind for everyone. Right. Allowing our food manufacturers to be able to trace through cold supply chains, where all of their sources are coming from, and ensuring that it's been at the correct temperature throughout the entire journey. We play heavily in warehouses and distribution centers, right? Whether it be barcode scanning or RFID reading, machine vision, robotics, scan tunnels, really helping all of the warehousing partners out in the world utilize and create a very efficient process. Right? Big in healthcare, right? So we have a whole line of healthcare devices to help hospitals and healthcare providers, really run a more efficient and safe environment. And then retail, right? Certainly in clothing retailers are moving heavily into RFID tracking with expensive clothing on the shelves, and to help combat some of the shrinkage concerns that they've been having over the past few years. So really across multiple different industries and environments.
In the end, when I look at this 4 categories of end customers, it's a quite dynamic and diverse environment. So it's it's not a single way of predicting how it's going to happen for you on the supply side.
Yeah, correct. Yes. Multiple different markets who kind of behave differently, different customers throughout the globe. And yeah, and it's really kind of understanding each of our customers' needs and requirements, and being able to forecast those and be able to deliver on the solutions that they're needing when they need them.
All right, it's good to keep in mind like that. But maybe you can get in deeper. What are you providing? What kind of products are you delivering as Zebra?
Yeah, so Zebra is very, very focused on delivering an ecosystem for our customers, right? Combining hardware, software, and services and support. Being in supply chain, my main focus, of course, here is in helping us deliver our hardware out to our customers, right? So, we have many different product types and form factors that we're managing through our supply chain. Kind of the first here on the left are our printers, right? So, these come in different forms, all the way from very large tabletop industrial printers, and we have desktop printers, and down to more smaller mobile printers, right? One of our biggest portfolios is with mobile computing, right? That is more of a cell phone type form factor, but combining that with barcode scanning and/or RFID scanning to help a lot of our logistics and retail customers. We also have a full line of ruggedized tablets. We have both mobile and stationary scanners, right, for point of use scanning and/or warehouse scanning. And then we also play heavily with RFID, right? This is one of my favorites. I'm a big skier, so I'm always proud when I come up to the ski lift and they scan my ski pass with a Zebra RFID reader. And then intelligent automation, right? So machine vision cameras, as well as robotics, and then of course, an entire suite of accessories that helps our customers really utilize all of our products.
Yeah. So we discussed it briefly with Jeff how AI could be applied in supply chain planning. But I can imagine that AI will also be applied within this kind of product to improve them, to get to talk to a scanner in your warehouse environment.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this, right? And this is some of the features that we're rolling out on our next generation products, right? Allowing for our customers to use Gen AI on our devices without having to connect with the cloud. And there's a lot of really exciting use cases out there that we're working with our customers on. So definitely a big focus on in both our hardware and our software solutions moving forward.
So maybe you can elaborate a bit more about the company size and that matters.
Yeah, sure. So just again, a little bit more background so you guys kind of understand what our supply chain looks like, what Zebra looks like, and ultimately how this is going to fit in with the shadow plan that we'll talk in more depth about. But Zebra as a corporation is about $4.6 billion of annual revenue. We have just under 10,000 employees across the globe. We heavily utilize channel partners to help sell our hardware and our solutions. And then we invest very heavy in R&D to ensure that our products and our solutions are the most cutting edge.
So when we're doing, and that might be of most interest for the supply chain people. So how do you manage your supply chain, and what does your supply chain look like?
Yeah, so we are a fully outsourced manufacturing company, right? So we have a handful of top tier 1 partners that we work with to build all of our products and our accessories. And we manufacture throughout the globe. We're manufacturing today in Mexico and then across the APAC region.
Mm-hmm.
We then have a mixed model with our distribution centers, both insourced and outsourced. But we have 3 main distribution centers that then service each of our regions. But then we also have a large number of cross docks that we utilize to help deliver product to our distribution partners, right?
Yeah.
And part of that large channel community. And then we have supply chain professionals throughout the globe, really in each of our regions, both close to our customers, but also close with our suppliers, of course.
So basically, when you look at this, it's a simplified overview because how many tier 1 contract manufacturers do you have? Roughly?
Yeah, it's kind of top tier 1 partners. We'll call it 5 to 10.
Okay. Yeah. All right. So maybe that gives an overview. But now we get into well, the supply chain planning part, and then we get talk about your IT portfolio to manage this whole complex supply chain. And now it's getting interesting. So talk us through. So you've been working with e2open, but you have a whole plethora of applications. Maybe you can go through it, how to manage this portfolio of IT applications to manage your supply chain.
Yeah, sure. So, this is kind of a map of how how we've partnered with e2open. We've been using e2open for many years now. The main the starting point of our relationship with e2open was really within supply planning, right? So we started with the supplier collaboration that we call Zebra Collaboration Management, right? And the best way I always describe this to the folks who aren't familiar in this space is, this is really a pipe between Zebra and all of its suppliers, right? And through that pipe, we are sending a demand signal out every other week. That demand signal is at the finished goods SKU level for each of our inventory orgs that we plan, and it goes out 52 weeks, right? So, every other week we're sending out that long range updated demand. And then each week we ask our suppliers to come back through that same pipe and provide their commits back to us on what they can build and when, right? And then we're utilizing that information to understand what our revenue is going to look like. And then we're also using that, and we're bringing that into our ERP system to go and promise deliveries out to our customers based on their sales orders, right? Then we, kind of the next steps that we took with e2open was to start to get into, the tier 2 supply base, right? What do our tier 1s component supply look like, right? And the first step we took was we created a part shortage management process utilizing e2open. And really think about this as a ticket-based workflow process where our tier 1s can come into e2open and they can highlight specific components that they're seeing problems with, right? Then we use this tool and this information we're getting from our tier 1s to then run a supply assurance process where we're bringing our commodity management teams and our component supply planning teams in to a weekly meeting, and we're reviewing all of those shortages and identifying what we can do to go solve them, right? Whether it be working with the original component supplier to try and help pull the supply in, or whether we're going out into the broker market to see what we can find for some of those parts that we're short, right? Then kind of the next step that we took was to not just look at the parts that were short, but get a full view from our tier 1 suppliers of what component supply looks like. So that's what we call supplier visibility, right? And there, for every component at each of our top tier 1 suppliers, we ask our suppliers to provide back to us what the consolidated demand is for every component, what their on-hand inventory looks like, and then what their POs and the supply commits for those POs look like.
So if you look back a few years, we mentioned now at the start of COVID, a lot of lockdowns and shortages. So did you have this already in place, and was it helping to get you through the phases of shortages during COVID?
We definitely had it in place, and it definitely helped, right? I think we also through that we found some shortfalls with just utilizing supplier visibility, right? And that's where some of this need to relaunch, and I'll talk about that a bit more, the shadow plan, right? So what I mean by that is, hey, supplier visibility tells us that we're short on a specific component, let's say, right? But what it doesn't tell us is then what products that component goes into, right? How we're allocating that constraint amongst our products, right? What the revenue risk is, and really answer the question if we're making the right allocation decision.
Before we go into deep with the shadow planning in the next slide, maybe you can expand a bit more about the other applications. You see, the channel management on the left-hand side and demand planning, and then moving into your supply planning. So you have e2open for warehouse operations. How do
Yeah.
they tie in all this, or not so much?
Not so much, but we do utilize the former BlueJ software that e2open acquires in some of our distribution centers and our repair depots. And then we're also using e2open more on the customer facing side. So we're using collaboration management with some of our top distribution partners to get real-time visibility of sales out information, and then also what their days on hand of finished goods supply looks like, right? And we're feeding that information back to our demand planning teams, so that they understand kind of what the sales out flow looks like, and to help anticipate whether we think our distribution partners are going to order more or less based on their current stocking levels.
Okay, that's clear. So now let's talk about the cool part. I think the shadow planning and the tier 1 and tier 2, because this is quite interesting. I haven't seen it to this extent before. But so Ty, explain, because I think this is very neat to talk about a real digital supply chain twin.
Yeah. So again, I kind of bigger picture, right? So as I described, we're sending a demand signal to our suppliers, and that demand signal is at the finished goods level, right? We're then also sending to our suppliers a list of priorities, right? So we're through e2open, we're sending for every SKU and every org, the list of customer sales orders that make up, that is a subsection of the total demand. We're also sharing large deals that are in the pipeline that we want to prioritize builds on. And then, also we kind of have a segmented portfolio where some of our products are build to order, some of our products are build to forecast, right? So we send this total demand signal, we send a prioritized list of demands, and then ultimately we rely on our tier 1 suppliers to take all that information, to look at their component supply, and decide what they can build, and when, and send that those commits back to us, right? So what we found over time is that we really want to understand more about how our tier 1s are developing that can build. Right? How are they taking all of this information and coming back with a finished goods SKU level build plan and commit? And we want to make sure that we're making the right decisions, we're allocating our constraints in the best way, and then ultimately we'll talk about it in a minute, but we have a real desire and need to be able to do real-time what if scenario modeling, right?
Yeah, I see here demand priorities, and you mentioned you have basically 4 customer categories. You have healthcare in the food, retail, in the warehousing environment. Do you also prioritize among these categories, or are they dissected by different suppliers?
Good question. It is. I think this is less about allocating between prioritized customers or verticals,
Hmm.
and this is more about you know we're we're sending a total demand signal that includes some forecast of what we believe future orders are going to look like, but
Yep.
it also includes our current orders and some large deals that where we haven't received the order yet, but we want to start pre-building them,
Hmm.
right? So it's more about sharing booked orders, right? Which is priority number one,
Yep.
right? That's orders in hand that we need to fulfill our commit dates out to our customers. Then priority two becomes large deals that we're preparing for, and we've worked with our sales teams and our business units to agree that that's a risk we want to take, and we have a high likelihood that the customer is going to come in and order it.
Hmm.
And then beyond that, we're then uh, we're building some of our high running products to forecast, right? And these are products that we always want to make sure that we have on our shelves and our distributors have on their shelves.
Hmm.
So that kind of becomes priority number three. And then priority number four becomes some of those more build to order products, right? Where we want to forecast to our tier one suppliers so that they're going off and procuring the components based on that forecast, but we don't want to yet build them, right? We're holding off until we get that order in the future to go off and build them into a finished good, right?
Yep.
So again, kind of the shadow plan that we're talking about here. It's ultimately a digital twin of our tier one's can build process,
Hmm.
right? And we're really utilizing all of the information that is already flowing through e2open, right? Finished goods demands, component inventory, future component supply, manufacturing capacity, and then also the manufacturing bombs,
Hmm.
right? And I know we talked about this a bit. This is in some of the challenges we'll go through. Getting access to the manufacturing bombs is one of our biggest challenges because of the way we've decided to do business, right? So we jointly design some of our products with our suppliers, and through that relationship, the system of record for some of our products actually sits within our tier one systems, right? And the way we're getting the BOM information from our suppliers is through e2open, right? So
Yeah.
that's a critical piece.
Yeah. And if I look at this visualization on the right hand side, you see, in the middle you see supply chain planning, contact your tier one. On the right hand side, you see your procurement department. They're moving into the tier two, so that's quite unique, in my opinion. That as an OEM, you have access to your tier two, and also you get data, especially here on critical shortages. So you talked about 5 to 6 tier one contract manufacturers. So how many tier two suppliers do you have, and how do you get a handle on all that data?
Yeah, I do not have the exact number of tier two suppliers off the top of my head, but
But roughly,
yeah, I want to say 500-ish is
mm,
my estimate.
all right. Yeah, that's well, quite huge as base, well, to manage, I would say.
And the way Zebra has approached this is, again, I kind of talked a bit about some of our products. gone down the path of a joint design manufacturing process. But what we typically do is we're taking the product's bill of materials, and for some of the critical parts, we control those parts of the BOM.
Yeah.
Right. So, we call those Zebra controlled parts. And then for the more, some of the more off the shelf components, we allow our tier ones to manage those components and those suppliers.
So maybe we going to talk a bit more about the challenge of shadow planning, because this looks on paper very nice and neat with the e2open as a platform to share. But what do you think are the main challenges to get it running?
Yeah, and again, before I jump into the challenges, right? Just I want to hit on in more detail why we're doing this, right? Again, part of this is we want to go and validate that our tier ones are making the right allocation decisions, right? That we're utilizing any constrained resource, whether it be components or capacity, in the way that best helps Zebra and its customers. So that's kind of number one, and we don't have true visibility to that today, because all of the, let's call it the sausage making of the Ken build, happens inside of our tier ones, four walls and systems. But secondly is there's a whole slew of what if scenarios that we are constantly wanting to run, right? The one that is most prevalent is where a lot of our demand comes through large deals, right? That are often hard for us to forecast. So we have a lot of discussions with our regional sales teams around, hey, if customer X comes in and orders product Y, how long will it take us to build, and when can we deliver, right? And kind of the motion that we have to go through to answer that question today is we're going out to our tier one partners, we're asking, it's taking them maybe a few days up to a few weeks to come back to us with that answer, right? And it's something that we should and want to be able to answer on the fly, right? But even beyond that type of scenario modeling, we want this capability to help us get more proactive in our supply planning, right? We want to model what it would look like if we have demand downsides, right? What inventory would we be left with? What liability would we have? We want to be able to model demand upsides, right?
Yep.
So if we have a 20% upside, if we have a 50% demand upside, what breaks first, right? And what can we go off to proactively do to solve what the first constraints are going to be to help us with that upside agility protection, right? So we spend a lot of time talking about how we can create a more agile supply chain, and having this ability to do real-time what if scenario planning is instrumental to us. All right, so kind of back to the challenges. So
no. I see the freight mode. I can imagine that when you have disruptions or shortages, that you should be able to pivot. So source from other areas, isn't it?
Yeah, that's a big one, right? I was kind of going through the products that we offer. Certainly those large industrial tabletop printers, the desktop printers, some of the large mobile computing charging cradles that we have, right? Those are all extremely costly to ship via air.
Yeah.
Right. But if we run short and we have some critical customer orders, it's a decision that we might make. So being able to do that modeling on those products where we typically ship ocean, see what runs short, and it's it's an easy investment decision if we want to put component inventory onto our tier 1 supplier shelves compared to shipping a large industrial printer on an airplane versus a boat, right?
Yep. But this is reflecting the world what I mentioned and showed you with the ripple effects. You're now able to create scenarios to say, okay, this is happening over there, and these are the scenarios, and these are our options, either by pivot with the freight mode, etc.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. But that's awesome. I think a lot of companies should want this, especially when there's turbulent times happening in the world. So getting back to the challenges, because it sounds like everybody wants this, but maybe you can get into this. What is needed to get this happening?
Yeah. So again, this can build process that our tier 1s go through each and every day, right? I mean, that is a core competency for a tier 1 supplier, right? Yep. And we find that our different suppliers have different degrees of maturity there and expertise, right? But it's really a combination of both people and systems, right? And the more I've dove into this, the more I realize that there's definite science to this, but there's also an art to this, right? And you need a world-class team to do this process in a world-class way. And it's kind of a special skill set that we don't have inside of Zebra, because we've relied on our tier 1s to perform this part of the operation for us, right? So really what we've been talking a lot about is how how do we learn from our tier 1s, and how do we develop this capability and this skill set within our supply planning team, right? And I think a big part of this has been kind of that change management, right? With my organization, that we need to start thinking differently. We need to start better understanding how our tier 1s are doing this, both in their systems and processes, but also in the decisions that they're making each and every week, right? Because what you can't do in this is you cannot look at your supply data for every single part on the bill of materials, right? If you do that, you're going to find that it appears that you're short, I don't know, these screws, these labels, these boxes, right? When in reality, the likelihood of that being a true constraint is very low, right? So a big part of this, and this is part of the art, is determining which parts on the BOM are the potential constraints, and only using those critical parts to run your Ken build or your shadow plan, right? Because if you're not doing that, you're going to get a lot of false shortages, and you're going to spend a whole lot of time kind of chasing those down, right? So, kind of our first approach with this was, reach out to multiple tier 1 suppliers, try to start exercising the shadow plan. And we really just found that we were kind of too spread out we weren't focusing enough. We weren't able to, you know, understand all of the problems that were happening, and put all, you know, enough resources behind solving some of the challenges, right? So, you know, we've kind of regrouped here in the past month, after we've recognized the struggles we've had in getting this implemented, and you know, the change in our approach moving forward is we're gonna focus on one supplier, right? It's one of our more advanced suppliers, and you know, we're going to focus the full team on making this work with just one supplier, so that we can prove out the use case, we can prove out the process. We know we'll be able to work through some of the challenges there, and they'll be the same challenges we'll have with some of our other tier ones, right? But at least you know, we've kind of proven to ourselves that we're capable of standing this up, and then we'll take that, and we'll then look to, you know, kind of take it supplier by supplier as we roll it out.
So that's a huge learning to you know, you mentioned here you have an increased workload. So normally you would ask your suppliers, are you able to build for us every other week? But you know, now you have to change the rhythm and change, especially with this particular supplier, how to approach this company, you know, and to share and to go into their bill of material.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I think we came into this thinking this was, you know, the set for shadow planning was kind of a set it and forget it, right? You set up the manufacturing bonds, you have, you know, demand data, supply data coming through naturally each week through e2open. But you know, I think the reality here, and as we learn more about how our tier ones do this, it really takes maintenance each and every week, right? You know, certain parts of the BOM, come on and off the constraint part list, right? And you know, within the four walls of a manufacturing plant, the the companies who do this well, there's constant interaction between the shop floor, their planning department, and their purchasing department, right? To kind of decide every week what they need to be looking at when they're figuring out their Ken build, right? And it's just kind of a circular motion that happens every week. So, you know, what we're having to do is kind of recreate that circular motion, connect with our tier ones, shop floor, purchasing, and planning teams, so that we have that same information inside of our shadow plan, and we can successfully run it. And it's a good digital twin of what's happening on their side.
If I look at all this, you know, I've been around quite a while, and it's a supply chain software environment, knowing ERP, etc. When I look back, you know, 10, 15 years ago, when companies were implementing ERP systems, you know, most of the times the bill of material and the lead times, etc., was set on default, and over time lead time has changed dramatically, and that's something you are experiencing now on a daily or a bi-weekly basis or in between, that you have to be on top of that, because these lead times are changing, you know, the setup of bill of materials are changing. So this is when you go in a real-time world, you have to have some feedback loops to update this kind of what normally was default data quite frequently.
Yeah, no, definitely, right. And that is, you know, so we do get that information. It's not real time, but
No.
it's weekly from our suppliers,
Yeah,
right? So
yeah.
that is part of supplier visibility data that we're getting today through e2open, right? So for every component, our tier one suppliers are sharing the demand, the supply, the purchase orders, but they're also sharing the lead time that they have set up in their ERP systems or MRP systems
Mhm.
for each of the components. So we're getting that data into the shadow plan, which is great. And then as bills of materials change, right, within their manufacturing floor, we're getting those updates into e2open shadow plan, right? You know, there's certainly some challenges behind that, and it's relying on our tier ones to ensure that they're first updating their systems, but then second, ensuring that those updates are coming back to us in the supplier visibility feed.
Okay. All right. You mentioned already to some extent the next steps, but well, summarizing it all. So what are the major steps? So you have said, you have to focus on one tier one supplier and then move to another. So what are your next steps in the next month and the next year?
Yeah. So again, we've narrowed our focus to one supplier. We have a large support team who we're going through as a team each week what the data looks like and what the results look like, right? And then we have that feedback loop with that specific tier one, right? So we're churning our shadow plan, we're getting the results, and then we're going back and talking with that tier one supplier to say, well, hey, you guys are committing that you can ship this many of this product, but when we're running our shadow plan, we're seeing something different, and we're seeing that we can, let's say, build less of that product because we're short this part, right? Why is it that you're telling us that you think you can ship more, right? And we're having to create that kind of additional weekly connection and feedback loop, so that as our supplier is kind of going through the weekly maintenance of their Ken build, that we're doing the same and we're keeping up with it.
So when you look at back, of course, COVID, early 2020 happening, but also you see some floods happening in APEC, etc., having an impact. These are the scenarios. These are the alerts you are scanning for and use for to run a scenario, or how do I have to see that?
Yeah, it's so I don't think we would utilize shadow planning to try and get better visibility into what might happen in the future. Right? I think how we would use shadow planning is to model demand upsides or demand downsides, and understand what breaks first or what the biggest liabilities comes out of that, right? And so that we can take that information and try and drive different decision making, potentially different negotiations to create a more agile supply chain, so that when events like that do happen, we're better prepared to react quicker.
And getting back to your pipeline, your commercial pipeline. So normally you would get requests from your commercial colleagues. This is coming in. Sometimes are booked, or these are in the pipeline. Are you able to respond more quickly and more accurately on those kind of pipeline requests, commercial requests?
Well, not yet, but that's certainly the goal of this, right? We talk a lot about the desire to set up our supply chain to hit a specific percentage demand upside within a certain time window, right? And then we're trying to really drive all of our investments and our decisions around being able to hit that set upside protection, excuse me, at the lowest possible cost.
Right. I think you elaborated a lot about how you're applying this first major steps in shadow planning. But maybe Jeff, you can elaborate how you see it, how you can apply it, and how you can see it expanding in a broader sense.
Yeah, thank you. I think all of this has been massively helpful. Ty, thank you for all the specific information related to how you guys are using it and where you see the value. At at e2open, we're really set up to help brands close that blind spot between the order being placed and when the shipment arrives at the warehouse. And we really recognize that there's so many things that can change during that time period for the brands, for the suppliers, to the supply chain in general. And it's kind of funny as I think about this, the thing that pops in my head is a picture of the Apollo 13, reentry, moon landing, reentry into the atmosphere. And, you see that control center where everybody's really just holding their breath during that 2 minutes of silence, hoping everything's going to come out okay on the other side. They're really relying on hope and just trusting. And trust is one thing, but we believe that you should really trust, but verify.
Mm-hmm.
And what that means is it means collecting as much information as you can during that blind spot. So there's so many processes and collaborative sharing opportunities that allow the brands to gain better insight based on what's changing. That's a lot of what Ty was talking about. It's like, we have this problem, we want to know, maybe not even a problem, we have an opportunity. Perhaps there's a large order. How can we know what we can commit to there? So, there's so many puzzle pieces that can come into play there. You can share forecasts and gain forecast commitments. You collaborate on the open orders. You collect the supplier inventory data. As Ty mentioned, the can build process and even clear to build processes. Mm-hmm. But you also add in the logistics information and the additional supply and demand sensing data. And ultimately, you're building a complete digital twin of the brand supply chain and all of the components and constraints and everything. And that digital twin is therefore the basis for enabling the advantages of shadow planning. So let me say this, brands are attempting to do this today, but it's just a very, very manual process to collect all the data, analyze the best way path forward, and really put that in motion. They've got to constantly monitor changes. They want to run all the different scenarios to understand the potential impacts. But also it requires enhanced collaboration to really ensure that the goals of all the parties that are working towards the best resolution are met. And last, it requires risk mitigation to properly address all these issues that you can now see and find and be exposed to based on the data. So without an effective digital twin, shared data, and the shadow planning simulations, all of this is extremely manual. However, we found out that by building a foundation of a well-fed digital supply chain twin, that process is massively streamlined, and it allows for these shadow planning simulations to really consider so many different aspects that are possible. And the output of this is really the ability to answer some of those key questions that Ty was asking. What's the optimal product mix based on this new information? What's the best capacity utilization? How can I meet my transportation budget, and how can I balance or rebalance my inventory? So as you can see here, and as you kind of heard from Ty at Zebra, the path to shadow planning is a journey. It takes stacking building blocks of processes to really close that data gap. And then once you do, you now have the ability to fully utilize your supply planning simulations to find that best optimal path forward. So if you want to learn more about that, I'm happy to help you. So reach out to us if possible. But that should hopefully summarize a little bit of what we were talking about quite in depth with Ty's examples.
Yeah, it was great talking to Ty and also to you, Jeff. We talk about, all these ripple effects and the major center of it, all the bullwhips. And again, you can only manage these bullwhips when you look over your next tiers, and then, you can have this trust, but you have to verify what you're seeing. So basically, wrapping up, what I see, what's happening in the world, basically you have to visualize your ecosystem. So it's not linear anymore, like raw material production, wholesale, retail to the consumer. No, it's getting bigger and bigger. You have contract manufacturers, you have logistics service providers, you get circular, you get all kind of new raw materials, but also other companies are getting in. Governments have a say. You have shareholders, stakeholders, NGOs, banks, etc. So basically, you have to visualize your whole ecosystem with the flows of goods, information, and money, and sometimes people, when you have a capacity shortage in that area. And the next thing is, where do you expect or do you see disruption? Talking to Ty, when you see floodings happening and then you are able to respond. But on the other area is, we talk a lot about collaboration, but where do you find the synergies? And I think with the tier ones and also the tier twos looking into what Zebra is doing with the shadow planning, they are looking into their tier ones and tier twos to create synergies, and they have this digital pipeline with e2open to share data, and then you create synergies in that sense. All right. It was quite interesting to see, well, unfortunately, we don't have any time left for a Q&A, but I think there's a lot of things said between the three of us. So what I would like to suggest right after this, so if you want to talk to Ty and Jeff and me, do sit down in the lounge right after this. Within a minute, we will be sitting at table 1, and you can have a direct conversation with Ty, Jeff, and me. So that's what I think we should do. So there's more information. You can download our ecosystem as an example, and there's more cases and information about end-to-end orchestration by e2open and some cases. So I would like to wrap up. So Ty, thank you very much for being so open to share your digital supply chain journey.
Thanks for having me.
And Ty, thank you for explaining how it all fits together and what e2open is bringing to the market and how we can use a digital supply chain plan, and also where we can find applications of AI and that kind of stuff. So with that, thank you, Jeff. Thank you for the audience for listening in, and I hope you like it. And I hope to see you again in real life, face to face, or in the next webinar. Thanks for now, and Ty and Jeff will be joining in the virtual lounge. Thank you for now, and bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.